John Cantrell is the pseudonymous creator of Sensei, a Lightning implementation designed to make Bitcoin accessible to the entire world. In our conversation, we got into exactly what Sensei is, its relationship to Spiral's BDK and LDK. We got into some emerging payments use cases that can be built on Lightning, and we also discussed the broader Lightning node implementation landscape. This is a Lightning podcast, so the best way you can show your support is by sending in sats, comments, and questions over the Lightning Network. I read off every comment and answer every question at the end of the show in the Lightning round, and thank you to everyone who has sent in sats so far. Quick shout out before we get into the episode. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage, the next generation provider and industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Zebedee. That's Zebedee, and Zebedee is your portal into the world of Bitcoin gaming. We will have more from Voltage and Zebedee later in the show. John, thank you for coming on the show today. I'm excited to chat with you about what you're building at Sensei. But before we get into that, let's start with your background in Bitcoin, because I first discovered you through a bunch of your Twitter threads, and you've got a depth of knowledge of the Bitcoin space that I haven't seen from many other people. So I'd love to know more about your background in Bitcoin, when you first got into it, and when you decided you wanted to spend your time building on Bitcoin.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, by the way. And yeah, it's a great question, and everyone always asks that question, like, oh, how did you get into Bitcoin, or what's your Bitcoin like origin story? And everyone has one, and I don't know why, but I can't really remember like the first time I heard about Bitcoin or read the white paper or something like that. It's not like a memorable moment for me, which is weird in retrospect, since I've spent the last 10 years of my life on this. But I can't really remember like, oh, I saw it on Hacker News, or a lot of people have that story, or I saw it somewhere else. So I can't really remember where it was, but basically like. I don't know. I guess I don't know the story, but basically I have been working, kind of trying to build on top of Bitcoin for a long time. So about 9 years ago, maybe at this point, I made a first like binary options style betting site on top of Bitcoin that used Bitcoin for the money, and then maybe flash forward 6 or 7 or like 2 years after that, I was trying to build a payments company on top of Bitcoin. And so I guess what I'm saying is I've never, for a while, I hadn't been deep in the technicals of Bitcoin. I wasn't kind of digging into how it worked under the hood. It was more like, what can I build with this? What can I build on top of it? And that's sort of always been, for a long time, where I lived. And it wasn't until maybe 3 years ago that I really started to dig deep, and I went through Chain Code Labs, and I read I think it was maybe Jimmy Song's book, Programming Bitcoin, and kind of started to go really deep on the technicals. And I wanted to make sure I had a really good grasp on sort of the fundamentals of what is this system, how does it work at the lowest levels, and that then extended to the Lightning Network, which is another whole beast and another whole set of concepts to master. And so I've spent, I would say, really only a couple years going incredibly deep on this, and that sort of kind of brought me to this the grant from Spiral, where I've been kind of exploring what you can build using both the Bitcoin development kit and the Lightning development kit together. And that then eventually led me down this path to creating Sensei, which is a Lightning node implementation built on top of both of those projects.
Right. What was it about Lightning that stuck out to you originally? Why did you think Lightning was the place that you wanted to then build on top of after learning about Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is somewhat related to like the layer one is, it's not completely ossified, but it is very on purpose. It's kept very simple. In some ways it's simple, right? It's not trying to do everything on layer one. It's trying to be, censorship resistant sound money that can't be inflated. It can't be seized. And that's all it's trying to be. And so with that limitation, there's not a lot you can really, well, it's hard to hard to talk about this without, I was about to say there's not a lot you can do with it at the base layer, but there really is. It just depends on your definition of a lot. It's not going to be, this complicated smart contract platform like Ethereum or I don't know, Avalanche or Polkadot. I don't follow any of these other chains, but it's not trying to do everything on layer one. And so, with that in mind, you really needed a layer two like Lightning to help scale the system and make it accessible to as many people as possible. And so that's really what drew me to Lightning, was this ability to basically take this original concept and extend it in a way that can make it accessible to the entire world. Well, hopefully at least. And also it allows you to develop a little bit more freely because it doesn't need to be, all the changes don't need to be agreed upon in this like consensus manner that layer one does. People are free to kind of, as long as they adhere to the spec roughly, you can kind of experiment on Lightning, and that lets you, do crazy things like what, Sphinx Chat or Zion are doing, where they're kind of, in some would say, abusing basically the peer-to-peer network of Lightning to do things more than payments. And so there is this ability to kind of experiment and prototype on top of Lightning that is a little more difficult to do on layer one.
Do you think there are some use cases, like you mentioned this, people saying that Sphinx and Zion may be abusing the network by doing things that are not related to payments. Are there things that don't belong on Lightning over the long run? Do you think there's a class of activities or things that just should not be put on the Lightning network?
I don't know. So I've experimented with some of those ideas and played with them myself, and I think they're really interesting in the sense that you can use this already bootstrap network, like this peer-to-peer network of Lightning nodes that's being used for some other purpose, primarily payments, and you can kind of use that to, instead of having to bootstrap your own network for whatever application you're trying to build. So like if you want to build a messaging app like Sphinx, it's really difficult to get thousands of people to run a Sphinx node if that was a thing, right? And so instead they're saying, hey, we already have this established peer-to-peer network, the Lightning network. Can we utilize that in some fashion so that we don't have to bootstrap our own peer-to-peer network for routing all these messages? And then you get the other interesting benefits of having a payments network built into your application. So I think it still feels like it's interesting to me. And for there's a lot of people who would call it, I guess, abuse, and it's similar to people who say like that there are like spam on layer one, people like using transactions for things that they shouldn't be, whatever that means. I sort of think I fall in the camp of, as long as you're willing to pay the fee, who's to say what you're allowed or should be doing with the network. And so if you're willing to pay the layer one fees to make an op return, to put some kind of signature on the blockchain, go ahead, as long as you're willing to pay for it. And I think I feel similarly for Lightning and layer two. If you're willing to pay the routing fees to get your messages routed over this network, I guess go ahead. And I guess, maybe worst case scenario, it kind of bifurcates the Lightning network into multiple subnetworks, which I think is something we're already probably going to see and probably already exists, right? There's no like single Lightning network. It's like little subsections of the network can be created between different companies. Like I'm not sure, but I would imagine a lot of the exchanges would kind of maybe have their own little micro Lightning network between them, a set of channels essentially that are private, and normal, air quote, normal people aren't routing through them or anything like that. So I don't know. I don't think it's really an abuse. I think as long as you're willing to pay the fees, or you basically end up creating the subnetwork, I think it's important to explore what is enabled by this new technology. Since it's so young, it seems like a bad idea just to say, hey, this feels like an abuse. Stop playing, stop experimenting. I think the experimentation is good.
Right. And what would be the negative consequences of potentially, like, if does too many messages on the Lightning Network create negative consequences, other than maybe a bifurcation of the network? Does it create negative consequences for people who are not sending messages? Does it slow transaction throughput? Does it create congestion? Like, what are those limitations that something like messaging or another application that's not payments could cause for the Lightning Network?
Yeah, I think it's just a constraint on the, well, it's hard to have hard numbers for this, but basically if you think about it, if I'm running a routing Lightning node that's routing payments on the Lightning Network, and I don't know, let's just pick some made up number. There's 10,000 payments per day. We could look this number up, maybe roughly of publicly, maybe we can't. Anyways, say there's some fixed number of payments being routed on the network on any given day. So as my routing node, I am, with each payment that is routed, there's bandwidth costs, there's CPU costs, there's, I guess, some, storage costs. You have to, while these payments are in flight, you have to manage these in-flight HTLCs. And so there is some resource cost to routing a payment over the network that these nodes in the middle need to, someone needs to pay for. These resources aren't free. A lot of the, hobbyists or pleb nets, they're running these nodes at home. And so it's relatively cheap. They had the upfront cost of, the hardware to run the node, but there's also kind of the ongoing electricity costs and, like, I don't know, operating costs. So there are costs involved in running these nodes. And so if you were to start pushing 10x the number of payments over the network, it's going to, I don't know, I don't think it scales linearly. Like, I don't think it's going to 10x the cost, but there is the cost to run one of these nodes scales with the cost, or with the number of payments being routed. Okay. And so if you have these use cases like messaging or what have you, any other use that is sort of attaching itself to these payments, you're just increasing the cost essentially to operate like a routing node on the network. And so it's very similar to layer one, where the layer one block size debate, where, if we increase the block size to 10 megabytes or 100 megabytes or whatever, Elon and Vlad want to 10 gigabytes, well, now you're increasing the cost to run a node, a validating node on the network. And that's a centralization force for the network as a whole. It means fewer and fewer people have the resources to be able to run a node. And so you'd get the same sort of effects on Lightning, where if you had to route, instead of just routing 1,000 payments a day, you needed to be able to route 1,000,000 payments a day. Well, that's going to cost you more to be able to do that. And so similarly to raising the block size, there is no real equivalent. I mean, that's not really true. There's mostly no equivalent to that on Lightning Network, but it means as the number of payments that your node is processing scales, so do your costs. And so it could make it harder for people to run. It makes it more expensive to run nodes on the network, which could lead to these larger hubs being created, a centralization force on the Lightning Network, where you might have fewer nodes and more hubs, where it's just these massive data center style Lightning nodes. So
And
that
now
is the downside.
I know you've done some work with Juggernaut in kind of like building some of these messaging, building like a version of Sphinx where you do have messaging on the Lightning Network. So do you think then that the future of, let's say, messaging or social media or like a non-payments related task is going to be off Lightning and only on Lightning for the payment aspect of it? Do you think all the messages are going to live, off of Lightning? Because I get, key send messages through podcasting 2.0 apps,
Right.
that kind of stuff. Do you think it's going to eventually move off of Lightning?
It's hard to say. I mean, there's the alternative. There's a couple alternatives being worked on. Like there's something like Nostra. I think it's Fiat Jeff's kind of child that a bunch of people have kind of started to run with. And yeah, I think the idea with that is sort of, let's separate the data from the payment a little bit. You can still integrate Lightning with something like this, so that you get the the instantaneous payments tied to the data. It's just not, you're not like reusing the payment to be the data itself. You know, it's not. I'm not sure if I'm saying that clearly,
Right.
but sorry, what was I lost track of the original question again. What was
No, that makes sense. That basically, like, you may have a future where you only use Lightning for the payments aspect and not have to bundle the messages within a
Right.
payment. I get that. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, I guess what I was going to say then was back to this the nice thing that I still think is interesting about utilizing the Lightning Network is what I was talking about before, which is a real challenge for something like a decentralized messaging or social media app, which is you need to get people to run these nodes. If it's only Signal running the node, then is it real? Like how decentralized, is it? And so with Lightning Network, you have this existing network that would be nice to take advantage of as long as it was opt-in, maybe like some sort of like sub network within the Lightning Network that these people are okay running these nodes. Um, so I'm not. I obviously it's hard to say what the future will hold, but um, it seems like there's a trend away from trying to do the payments like this mess, like passing data along with the payments over the network, and trying to move towards more of this Nostra or some other model where the data itself is transferred externally to the Lightning Network. But we'll
Yeah.
see. A lot of people are playing with a lot of different ideas, and I think that's obviously the best way to figure out what works.
Yeah, and that's really exciting. Let's get into what you're building with Sensei, because I think this is going to be a really important project that a lot of people may not know about. So for listeners who aren't familiar, can you give everyone a background on what Sensei is and what you're trying to accomplish with this project?
Yep. So Sensei is another Lightning node, I guess you could say client, or another Lightning node similar to like an LND or now like Core Lightning, it used to be called C Lightning. And so those are sort of the two primary Lightning node implementations. And Sensei by itself is not a implementation of the Lightning Network protocol. It relies on LDK for that, the Lightning Development Kit. But it is sort of a standalone Lightning node implementation. So you can think of it just like LND or C Lightning. So if you wanted to spin up a node and connect to the Lightning Network and send and receive payments, create and close channels, you could use Sensei for that.
Interesting. Now, on your site, it says Sensei is a Lightning node implementation focused on making Bitcoin accessible to the entire world. Can you elaborate on exactly what that means for you?
Yeah, the ideas behind that concept was this one feature that makes Sensei a little different than the implementations that that you might have like LND and C Lightning, is this idea of these lightweight child nodes. So one of the interesting things with the Lightning Development Kit is that it's not a full node by itself. It's just all of the building blocks you need to implement the protocol. So it makes it a lot easier for a developer like myself to build a Lightning node without having to worry about all the low level details. And as part of that, it also means you can put together the node exactly for what you need for your use case. And so in this use case, the idea was, how can I build a Lightning node that could actually within itself be thousands of Lightning nodes, but within one app essentially. And so it basically uses the Lightning Development Kit to piece together these what I call lightweight nodes, basically that all share some components of the Lightning Network. So to run a Lightning Network node, you need to be monitoring the chain to make sure that the channels are opened and that people aren't trying to cheat you and close the channels early or with old states and things like that. So you need to be constantly monitoring the chain. You also need to constantly be building and maintaining a view of the network, the Lightning Network graph. And you need that so that you can be able to route payments across the network. So to be able to route payments, you need to know what nodes exist and what channels exist and how to find a path. And there's lots of other components to what goes into running a Lightning node, but those are sort of two of the big ones. And what these lightweight child nodes do is they all use the same network graph, and they all use the same chain state monitor. And so they end up being extremely low. They have an extremely low resource utilization. So they don't cost a lot of resources in terms of like CPU or memory to run these lightweight nodes. And so Sensei can run thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of nodes on extremely cheap resources. So like maybe on a Raspberry Pi. I haven't done the benchmarking yet, but one of the goals is to be able to run, I don't know, say 10,000 nodes on a Raspberry Pi. And so I guess that's a long way of getting to your answer of what does this have to do with Bitcoin adoption. And the answer is that I think one way to onboard a lot of, I guess let's go back. I don't think every human on Earth is going to run a Lightning node, like a full standalone Lightning node. Like it's hard to expect someone to run LND who barely knows, I don't know, if they're not like a developer or something or not very technical, to have to maintain and manage the channels and the uptime of the server and all of that. It's asking a lot of a person. Now things like Umbrel make that a lot easier, where it's kind of like a plug and play node in a box, and I love what they're doing at Umbrel and MyNode and all these guys building solutions for consumers to run nodes at home. But there's on the other end of the spectrum, there's someone like full custodial solutions like Cash App, or I don't know, so all these exchanges that are integrating Lightning now kind of enable Lightning for those users. But there's some set of users somewhere in the middle there. There's going to be like a full spectrum of how people end up using Bitcoin and Lightning in the future. And Sensei is sort of meant to be just another option where you could have someone who is that kind of technical expert, or someone who does run, that's like a hobbyist runs an LND node today. They could run a Sensei node and spin up thousands of nodes for their friends and family and community. And it's sort of similar model to like a LND hub or LN bits. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they basically allow you to create sub-accounts essentially off of your Lightning node. The main difference with Sensei is that these accounts are actually fully running Lightning nodes. So they have their own set of channels if they want. They have their own, setup here. They have basically they are, as far as the Lightning Network concerns, they are independent Lightning nodes, but you're able to manage them for them. So you can have someone who is in charge of managing the liquidity and uptime of your Lightning node.
And would all those nodes be running on the single, like you mentioned, you could potentially put 10,000 on a single Raspberry Pi. Do you think that one person and one set of hardware will control all those nodes?
That's an option. It can be that way, or it might just be you run 10 nodes for your immediate family and friends or something like that, so they can each have a node. This is even more important with things like Sphinx, or if these apps, Sphinx or Zion or Juggernaut or Podcasting 2.0, where the people actually need an always online node to be able to receive payments or messages or or tips or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so you could set this up for however many people you want. Is sort of the idea. Is like whatever your local network is, you could help them get onboarded to the Lightning Network.
Do you think that by expanding the number of people that have access to the Lightning Network by a factor of maybe 10 or 100 or 1,000, what might some of those interesting new use cases for Lightning be when all of a sudden you can bring the whole world onto Lightning? Like right now, it seems like we probably have a limited set of use cases today, because there's a limited number of users, and truly most Lightning users are kind of Bitcoin focused. There's a lot of like privacy apps or Bitcoin specific apps sending money on Bitcoin. Like, do you think there will be more kind of mainstream use cases for Lightning Network nodes once we have more people on board?
I would say the main use case I think will forever be payments. I think that's sort of its intent, is to enable Bitcoin to actually be used for payments, because layer one, I guess today you can use it for payments, but in a future where the block space remains, in contention or desire, like highly desired, the fees might be too high to use it for payments. And so that's where we got the Lightning Network, which is supposed to enable basically instantaneous and nearly free payments for Bitcoin, right? And so as the world adopts Lightning, I think what it really enables is the ability to really use Bitcoin as a payment rail, as a payment technology for whatever app you might be working on. And so, some examples of what. So then you get it's more about enabling it to actually be used as money. I think that's really the main use case that would be enabled as more people are adopted. And things like what Zebedee are working on, and some, I'm sure there's some other, maybe Thunder Games. But basically this gaming use case is pretty interesting to me. This idea that you could basically earn, play to earn. This play to earn model is really interesting in the sense that you can now, for the first time ever, really actually send someone money in any country, from anywhere, basically, without having to deal with the traditional banking system. And so I think it will enable new use cases in gaming and even entertainment. Like, I have this idea that around kind of reinventing old, like 2000 era or 90s era television game shows, but modernize them with the internet and Bitcoin, because you can send money through your TV now, right? So someone watching from home, previously they could just shout out the answer or whatever, pretend they're playing, but they get kudos from their friends on the couch, but they can't actually win any money. Whereas with Bitcoin and Lightning, it enables them to act like the show could send them money in real time, through the TV, which is something that just couldn't be done before. And so I think there'll be interesting use cases that we'll see in gaming and entertainment, and things like that, once the world has sort of, like, once everyone has a Lightning wallet in their pocket, essentially.
That's really interesting. I haven't heard that kind of like TV show use case before, but it does make total sense. I think there was a game it was a popular mobile game. I don't remember the name of it now. It was like HQ Trivia, I think. That was kind of trying to do something like that. They were doing it on Fiat rails,
Yep.
and I don't think it was. It might have been. I don't think it was instant though to earn the money. I think maybe you had to get a large. You like won a jackpot.
Exactly. Yeah,
at
there
the
were a
end,
lot
right?
of. I don't know the detail. I never won, though. I think one of my coworkers won actually one day. But basically, yeah, I think they limited the winners to that small set of people who could make it to the end. Right? It was always like, I don't know. I don't remember the numbers anymore, so I'm probably wrong. But yeah, it was like some smaller set of people were getting a larger amount of money. Whereas with Bitcoin payments, you could do the opposite. You could get a lot of people to win very little. Might not be exciting, but everyone could. Every question you could get a couple sats or something. So I think there's like a cool way to reinvent something like HQ Trivia with Bitcoin. It is actually something I've been brainstorming and plan to work on if I ever get enough time. But yeah, I think things like that, and thinking of things like that, where does what kind of cool payment use cases does Lightning enable, and how does it make it more fun, or engaging for the user, is really important.
That is fascinating. Now, do you think so? Let's use this example of like an HQ Trivia on Lightning, where you have millions of people playing. Do they all need their own nodes?
It depends. It depends on the constraints. So if they could, HQ Trivia it could be custodial, right? Where the HQ Trivia team just maintains a a balance for all of the users, and then when they want to go ahead and spend the money they won from their account, then HQ Trivia just pays the invoice, the Lightning invoices for them. So that would be one way to do it. That would be completely custodial, and you wouldn't really be receiving the money, but you could still spend it, on Stacker News or something, somewhere you could still send your sats on a Podcasting 2.0 app or something like that. So I think that would work, and then no one would need a Lightning node that is playing. I think what would be more exciting to me, and I don't know, maybe not to the users, which is unfortunate, but if those sats actually were live streamed into their own wallet, like their own non-custodial wallet. And to be able to receive sats in a non-custodial way, then you do need some type of node. That is where, the holy grail is to be able to run a non-custodial Lightning node on your phone. And there are a lot of interesting wallets that exist today that are non-custodial, but it's still a challenge to have the perfect experience, because you need to be online to receive. And so, a lot of times that's not a problem. Like if your friend's paying you in person and you want to use Lightning, then yeah, you can have the app open to receive. Or they can send you a push notification to tell you, hey, you have a payment incoming, you should open the app. But the ideal scenario would be something like it could process that payment for you in the background without actually having to open the app. But currently the app stores don't really let the developers do that. And so it is kind of a challenge today to have a really smooth user experience for a mobile Lightning node. But in this case, where it was like HQ Trivia, they would have a companion mobile app that the user would have to have open to answer the questions. And so they could have something like LDK-based node running right inside the app. And so the user would be online and they would have a node running, and in this case, you wouldn't even really need something like Sensei or an external node. It could all be done on the mobile device. Most likely, you might want to push things like routing payments and the network graph maintenance to a server or something like that. But largely, you could probably do it today with something like LDK.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage is the industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. Creating layer 2 applications and services on top of Bitcoin starts with Voltage, where you can spin up nodes, get access to liquidity, optimize your node, and much more. Voltage is leading the way as the next generation provider of Lightning Network infrastructure. And if you want to get a free trial and start using Voltage today, you can do so at voltage.cloud. I want to have a bit of a discussion about implementations and their kind of like business models. And maybe we could start with Sensei and the way that this project came to be, and what you think of like Sensei's future when it comes to business models and funding. I know a number of the implementations today are either closely tied to corporations or have raised venture capital funding themselves. What do you think about, how do you think about designing a business model or keeping this project open source, or what do you think the future holds for Sensei in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, open source funding is kind of this generic problem that is very challenging, and it's getting a lot better in the Bitcoin ecosystem these days. You have a lot more players that are willing to fund development of these projects that can remain completely like open source and revenue free largely. And these companies are doing it because they think Bitcoin is this extremely important project for humanity, and it needs to be able to have like money flow to developers so that they can maintain and continue to build the system out. And so it's, in general, it is a difficult problem. And Sensei will, in terms of Sensei, it will always be a free and open source project. It's not really tied to a business at this moment. It's similar to like, unlike I guess LND and Core Lightning, which are tied to Lightning Labs and Blockstream, who are trying to monetize in different ways. I think in general, like monetizing Bitcoin or Lightning is really challenging. I think a lot of people think they can do it, potentially do it by maybe routing fees or providing liquidity, something like through Lightning Labs pool service. I guess we're about to see what they have in store for Taro, where they're going to enable stable coins on Lightning. So maybe there'll be some kind of, I don't know, swaps and exchange functionality that they hope to generate revenue from. But I think largely it's pretty early for this entire ecosystem, and I think a lot of people are just maybe largely waiting and seeing. They're able to get funding from VCs to build out the network and build out the infrastructure needed, and then they have hope that when hyper Bitcoinization happens, there will be opportunities abound to generate revenue in the future. At least that's sort of my take on it. And so in terms of Sensei in the short term, I think, I'm currently operating under a Spiral grant. And hopefully they will continue to fund me. We'll see if they think that Sensei is an important project. Originally, the grant was to focus on integrating the Bitcoin development kit and the Lightning development kit, which are two other open source projects that Spiral also helps fund development for. And no one was really using them together. And so they kind of funded some work for me to go explore how the interface between the two libraries looks and how they interact. And that sort of, again, like I mentioned earlier, led to Sensei. But so yeah, I think, in the long term, projects like Sensei and BDK and LDK and a lot of the projects you see in the Bitcoin ecosystem are really going to have to rely on this kind of grant funding. It seems to be sort of the best we have at the moment for maintaining open source projects. The other model, I guess, is sort of what you see with Blockstream and some other companies, I guess Lightning Labs, like where they devote some percentage of their resources. Maybe they hire a couple people to work on the open source projects full time. That's another model that seems to be, I don't know if I would say popular, but seems to be happening. And I think it's a good one where these companies realize that, whatever products and services that they are using to generate revenue heavily rely on this open source ecosystem. And so they, it's important for them to be able to give back and maintain that ecosystem of which they rely on. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to see money available for open source development, and I guess fingers crossed. Yeah.
So do you think it's reasonable to expect that implementations could have like an opportunity to like absorb revenue in the same way applications do on Web 2? Like if you look at like the internet versus Facebook, Twitter, and Google, like the internet doesn't absorb much value, it doesn't capture anything. It's all the applications on top. And now in Lightning, we're starting to see like, as you mentioned with Pool, for example, the Lightning Labs team is able to extract some level of revenue from some of those swaps. And I guess my question is, do you think that that's a realistic future where implementations are able to capture value as well as applications? Or do you think it shifts at all?
Well, I guess the easier answer is I don't think the implementations themselves will be able to generate revenue. Like I think those will have to remain, free and open source projects. I think if you tried to, or if I tried to say, hey, Sensei is, $5 a month to run, or something like that. Or if it, I guess first of all, if it wasn't open source, then I would hope no one would use it. Like if I just said, hey, here's this Lightning node implementation, I'm not going to give you the source code, but just run it, and I promise that I'm not going to steal your funds. Well, that's entirely against the ethos and point of Bitcoin in general. So I think a closed sourced version would never work. And then if you try to monetize or gatekeep a open source project, someone will probably just fork it and remove the paywall. I can just take an open source project, fork it, and make a open version that doesn't have the paywall involved. So I'm not sure that's a great direct monetization of an open source project. I'm not actually familiar with a lot of the models out there. Maybe someone does it successfully, but it seems like that wouldn't work so well. And so I think the model that I'm not privy to any information at Lightning Labs or anything or Blockstream, but it seems like the hope is let's build and maintain this network and hope that there are other opportunities to build kind of services and applications on top of that that take advantage that because it exists, we then can explore other places to generate revenue, but not from the base layer infrastructure itself.
Right. So like a tangential consequence of having a
Right.
critical mass of people using that implementation. How do you think about the challenge of bootstrapping a mass of users and building up a network of users that are using Sensei? And how important is it that Sensei or the Lightning Development Kit, how important is that any of these projects have meaningful market share? Can the project be just as successful if you have 1% market share versus 50 or 100?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to how you just define success. But in terms of ways to get it out there, I think one important thing coming hopefully soon. We were just testing it last week, was like an Umbrel integration. So making it available on a lot of these node in the box solutions, making it easier for people to actually try it out, I think is an important first step, and that's something that I plan on doing for sure. In terms of what market, I don't know. I mean, it's for me, it's more about having another option out there. So right now we primarily only have these two implementations. I mean, there's also async. So I feel like some reason they get forgotten about a lot, and I don't really know why. But there is sort of this third implementation that's been maintained since the origin of the Lightning Network. But mostly people talk about LND and C Lightning, and even within that, I feel like I don't know. Again, I don't have any actual data to back this up, but it feels like LND currently has a significant share of the market. I don't know. I would guess 80% of the nodes on the Lightning Network, or maybe more, are LND. And to me, that that's kudos to them for ushering in. I think that was because of their focus on making it easy to run, easy to build on top of. Like C Lightning, for example, I think for a long time, I don't even know what the state of it is today, but for a long time didn't even expose kind of like an externally consumable API. You couldn't connect to it from something like Zeus or Thunder Hub or Ride the Lightning. It was really hard to use as a developer or a user who wants to use some of these apps that connect to your node. I think that might have held them back for a long time. I assume that that's fixed now. I see a lot of people posting about remote controlling my C Lightning node, and I know that they're integrated into Zeus and Ride the Lightning and all these now. So that maybe the fact that they started there kind of let Lightning Labs LND kind of gain this momentum that they have today. But anyway, my point was that I think it's important to have options, and I think Sensei provides yet another option, and I think that LDK is focused on a different set of use cases. There's a couple interesting features of one that I'll mention they're calling internally, I don't know if they have a marketing name for it, but they call it phantom payments, and it basically is a way to have essentially a cluster of nodes that could receive, you can generate an invoice that can be paid by or can be fulfilled by any of the nodes in that cluster. And so it's kind of this enterprise-like feature where if one of your nodes runs out of liquidity or goes down for some reason, any of these other nodes could stand in its place automatically and handle the invoice. And so it's features like that that they're focused on, and that I want to be able to surface in a consumer node or enterprise node like Sensei, because LDK doesn't produce a standalone node implementation. I thought it would be interesting to kind of fill that void, to say, let's take what they're working on at LDK and BDK and build a node that can kind of show off and provide access to people who aren't going to take the time to build their own node with LDK, which is sort of the intended usage of it, but provide an out-of-the-box standalone node that kind of showcases and kind of takes advantage of these cool features they're working on.
That's very cool, that phantom payments. Do you think that there's going to be a lot of new developers that come in and try and build their own versions of a Sensei using Lightning Development Kit and Bitcoin Development Kit? Like, I'm trying to get a sense for how big do you think, how many implementations do you think there will be over time? Do we continue to, bifurcate this implementation system?
Yeah, I think it's important to note, though, that even if there were, like, say, 100 different people who built things like Sensei with LDK, or like in terms of like what their implementation is, I think it would still be LDK. Like, LDK is still the protocol implementation, right? So when it's communicating with other nodes on the network, like externally, Sensei and, I don't know, some other node that's built with LDK will still look basically the same as far as like an LND node is concerned. It looks like an LDK node. It talks like an LDK node because it's using the protocol as implemented by LDK. And so you can think of something like Sensei as sort of a wrapper around the LDK implementation that provides things like a developer API or a UI to manage your node, or these child nodes, or whatever features and functionality I might want to add on top. But the Lightning implementation itself is still via the Lightning Development Kit. And so I just wanted to clarify that there's still sort of only, it's still only one sort of Lightning implementation. This just happens to be an application that bundles it up and packages it in a way similarly that LND and C Lightning do. And so I think LDK, as it was originally, or as it's intended, is meant to be used not in the way I'm using it, in a sense. Like, it's meant to be built into your application directly. So like if you were making a mobile app, this HQ Trivia is a perfect example. If I wanted to make this HQ Trivia app and I needed my users of this app to have access to the Lightning Network, what some people did before LDK was they would kind of hack it together to get hack is kind of not fair to Lightning Labs, but they would run LND, like LND mobile, essentially alongside their app, right? And so they would have LND running in a separate process and communicate to it from their HQ Trivia app. What LDK enables is the ability to kind of run the Lightning Network like native to your application. It connects directly. It's built into your application. Your app is is directly an implementation of the Lightning Network, and can pick and choose the pieces it needs to best suit, the requirements of your application. So I think we'll see lots of apps and wallets, I guess, take advantage of LDK's flexibility, but they won't necessarily be standalone nodes like Sensei is trying to be. So Sensei is trying to take the LDK implementation and build a Lightning node in a box, or I don't know what you call it, a Lightning node like a standalone Lightning node client similar to LND and C Lightning. And then how many of those we'll see, I don't know. Probably not that many, because I think, like you kind of alluded to, it's going to be difficult to get market share in that market when you have kind of the behemoths of Lightning Labs and Blockstream pushing theirs. And so it's going to require, some interesting features that are useful to people that these other implementations don't have.
Now, if you can squint and kind of look into the future and think about what some of those interesting features might look like, other than the ones you've mentioned, a few of them already, are there any that you want to see built and are not yet integrated into any Lightning implementations or nodes?
Well, the main ones are the ones I mentioned, but so I was exploring this child node idea. So this ability to spawn thousands of nodes in one process. The other one was this like phantom payments idea. I think is really interesting that these other nodes don't offer. I think there's, you know, some other things that I'm working on that again, these I don't think I guess I'm actually not super familiar with the other node implementations. I've been so focused on what I'm working on that I can't. It's hard for me to speak to what they have and don't have. But one thing I'm interested in is a problem that all Lightning wallets have today. Like if you were to build a wallet that and you integrated Lightning, the next problem you're going to have is that your users need channels. They need liquidity to be able to send and receive payments on this network. And so one thing I'm interested in building into Sensei is what people call an LSP, so a Lightning Service Provider. And basically it would allow users of Sensei to easily provide liquidity to their users. So like if you were to spawn 1,000 nodes, well now those nodes, they need channels and they need liquidity management. And so it would allow the Sensei process to act as an LSP and open and manage channels for them kind of on demand. And similarly to like this LSP functionality that I think we'll see in Sensei soon that I don't think these other implementations are focused on. They kind of separated them to something like Pool, right? They make you use this separate service. Another thing is like, we'll see it. Well, I don't know, but zero conf channels are coming to the spec very soon, and I don't know where they stand in terms of getting adopted in LND and C Lightning, but I know that they're going to be rolled out hopefully in the next version of LDK. So you'll see zero conf channels in Sensei, within a month, I'd say.
Can you explain exactly what zero conf channels are?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure. So normally when you open a channel, on Lightning, it's a you're basically broadcasting a Bitcoin transaction onto layer one, right, to do the channel opening. And typically the implementations wait. I'm sure they're configurable a little bit, but you need to wait 3 or 6 confirmations before you can go ahead and start using that channel, because you want to make sure that the funds that were input to open that channel are not double spent. And so you usually want to wait a bunch of confirmations before being able to use that channel. And with zero conf, it basically means that you can start, as long as the nodes opt in, both nodes opt into the zero conf feature, that the channel will be operable immediately. So soon as the transaction is broadcast and identified by both nodes, that channel is now live and can begin to route payments. And so if you think about it from like a usability perspective, if you're, I don't know, I don't want to pick on anyone, but I think Breeze actually does this today without even zero conf being in the spec. But basically the idea is if your users of your mobile wallet need to receive payments and they don't have any channels yet, you might use something like Pool or some other LSP to be able to get to buy a channel for them, essentially. But what you can do is open one on demand. So like as they're receiving a payment, you can open the channel to them as the payment comes in. But normally that would still be this normal channel, and so they would still have to wait the 6 or whatever confirmations to be able to really receive that money. But with zero conf channels combined with this LSP idea, a user could potentially receive money over the Lightning Network instantaneously without actually having to have a channel open first. So it kind of enables this really cool user experience that I'm excited to bring to Sensei.
That is really interesting. Do you think that from a user experience standpoint, what do you think, what form factor do you think nodes are going to take in the future? Do you think they are going to be like sleek devices that look really consumer friendly and that are easy for anyone to kind of grasp? Or do you think they will be Raspberry Pis?
Yeah. I'm hopeful that it depends how long term you're talking about when you say future, but I'm in the camp that is hopeful in 5 to 10 years that every node will just be on your phone and you won't even need to have there won't be separate devices. Maybe there'll be specialized like routing nodes or something, more kind of more of in the infrastructure side of things. But in terms of a consumer Lightning node, I think hopefully in 5, maybe 10 years, every single consumer will have a Lightning node in their pocket. It'll just be part of their phone. That's sort of
Right.
the end game, I think. That's sort of the dream.
And then it won't matter that they're not always online because of some of these innovations that you mentioned, and maybe if they're a child
Right.
node or something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, yeah, I think it doesn't. It'll typically your phone is online, right? It's connected to satellite, the cellular network or Wi-Fi almost all the time, and so it's a matter of the app like the Lightning node application being able to be online and like receive the payment for you. And I'm kind of alluding to the fact that in the future it'll be possible for that process to be able to run kind of in the background, sort of the same way Spotify is able to play music on your phone without the app being in the foreground. Like you can close the app and go do whatever else you want to do on your phone and the music still plays. All that needs to happen is Apple and Google and whatever need to give permissions to Lightning apps so that they can run something like playing music in the background. They can run this lightweight process that checks to make sure that you're online to receive can receive payments while the app is in the background. That would kind of, I think if we got something like that, that in terms of like permissions from the App Store, we would see basically Lightning nodes or whatever you want to call them, Lightning implementations be fully run on mobile without many issues.
Right. And then I guess, so if it does enable Lightning Node to run in the background, then it's just, when your phone's out of battery or when you're on airplane mode or something that you wouldn't be able to receive a payment. Is that the idea?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So in those cases, you might have a backup. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you have a situation where I guess those situations are rare that you would need to receive a payment and, I don't know, be in airplane mode. But I guess, I don't know.
Right.
Someone like you may be receiving streaming tips for people watching. You might want your node to be able to be online even if you're on an airplane, right? And so you can receive tips anytime. And so someone in certain use cases, yeah, I think you'll still need a standalone node that's either somewhere in the cloud or in your closet or in your router. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think for like 99% of the use cases, a mobile phone will probably be good to go.
Yeah. One thing I'm starting to think about, and one thing I'm noticing now, especially on the podcasting side of things, is I'm getting a lot more payments on Lightning than I have ever got in any other context in my life. Like just this number of payments that come
Yeah.
in, they come in frequencies that I don't expect, right? Someone can be listening to a podcast at 2 a.m. and I'm asleep, and every single minute they're sending in a different transaction. And I would have no way to expect, from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., I'm going to get 60 different transactions. And there's no other time in my life where I would expect to do 60 transactions, even in a day. I make 5 transactions a day, maybe on a credit card. It's just the volume of transactions is so much higher now. And I wonder how much of Lightning's kind of capacity to send payments to anyone, anywhere, at any time have we realized yet? How much bigger could this get? Could it get to the point where someone is receiving 60,000 transactions a second? Like, is that realistic? Or I just see this number starting to diverge in the last couple months. Like, the first couple months of Lightning, I've only been really seriously playing around with the network for the last, I guess, 9 months now. And just in the last 3 months, the podcasting numbers have started to really pick up. On Stacker News, for example, I now regularly will see like a dozen or so payments come in at different times throughout the day. And the numbers just keep growing and growing. And I wonder, like, how far along on that S curve or that inflection point do you think we are?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really early in terms of like global adoption of something like Lightning. I think you might be experiencing it slightly different because you're like a creator who's received, someone who is receiving. You have a reason to be receiving all of these payments, whereas like someone, well, I guess maybe you're really getting at the question of like this idea of like streaming small amounts of money everywhere we go, like to everyone, instead of, maybe people have this idea of like replacing the ad network with, I stream a few sats as I browse the web to all the sites that I visit or something like that. And like different kind of monetization, like models for the web in general, what can be unlocked. And I think there are a lot of people exploring, what's possible. There's also sort of another camp of people who think that like humans don't want micropayments. Like they don't, it gets too much for them mentally to account for, keep track of all these payments. Like you start to lose track of where your money is going, where you're spending it. And it's kind of like this new mental load of like every, if every site I go to, I'm sending them money. I don't know. It's cool. And I don't know where the limit is, like where I feel like we'll find some kind of balance where, um, I don't know, some in between of like I'm just walking, I don't know, just everything I do is streaming payments to like versus where we are today, where like I get my paycheck every 2 weeks or something like that instead of like streaming hourly to me. I think a lot of people think that's like another cool use case of like you kind of get paid for your work as you do it instead of like your company owing you this money essentially into the future. Um, I don't know. I
Cool.
haven't done a lot of like thinking or research into like sort of what people really want. Like, do people really want to be doing that model? Like, Lightning definitely enables it. It's definitely possible with
Hmm.
Lightning to be constantly sending payments. I think it's yet to be seen if that's like actually a good user experience. Because you can sort of
Agree.
fake that with the traditional payment rails, and you'll see this with things like AWS or Twilio or a lot of services where you pay by the minute or by the phone call or by the hour. Like people have implemented these services that way, on kind of the traditional payment rails, and they just sort of accrue a balance, right? Like you pay per hour to run a node on EC2, and then at the end of the month you owe whatever $20 for the 700 hours that you built. And so it's hard to know if paying them every hour really would be that much better for me than just paying them once a month anyways, even though I'm still billed hourly. And
Hmm.
it's something I've toyed with a lot, and I go back and forth on like, is it really like, I don't know, is it I don't know if it's like 10x better, does it need to be to get someone to change their behavior like that? I don't know, but Lightning definitely enables these new use cases where you can actually have like final settled payments instantly for every second if you wanted,
Yeah.
whereas you can't really do that with a credit card. And so um, I don't know. It feels like it enables something new, and I think we'll find out if people want it to be like that. I think people are. It's going to have to be a better experience for users at the end of the day,
Right.
if it's going
And
to
I think
be.
there's a way to split this up into spending and earning. And I think if you're thinking about spending money, that might be an area where you don't want streaming, or you don't want to know that you're always, it's like you're bleeding. You're just like
Yeah.
constantly losing money, and it's just like a horrible feeling. Every single second of the day, you're losing money. So
Yeah.
that's probably the side where it maybe doesn't make sense, or it's not as good of an experience. But
Hmm.
if you have earning, I think that might be a different side of things where it does. It seems like it's a little dopamine rush every time you get money, right, or you earn money or something.
Yep.
So if that happens more frequently, maybe that is beneficial to users. But I wonder if if you take all of the streaming happening, if everything turns into a stream, if we take this to its extreme point, right? Every single
Hmm.
payment in your life is now a stream. Well, all of a sudden, you have a really good sense of like your the growth of your net worth and your like budgeting. You have a very good sense for like every single second, maybe 100 sats are flowing out to cover my rent, to cover phone bill, to cover internet, everything, right? Like
Yeah.
you can see your whole life in one place, and you can see there's a constant stream of 100 sats going out, 100 sats per, I don't know, minute. I don't know how much that totals, but just use
Yeah.
that as a round number.
Sure.
And then you have maybe 120 sats coming in. And so you go, oh, I'm good. I'm going to be able to make ends meet this month,
Right.
right? Like I'm
Yeah, that's a
not going
really
to.
cool idea. Yeah.
Whereas like if you're depending on these 2 week paychecks and making huge lump sum payments, oh, this month I went on a vacation, this month I bought a couch, this month I did
Hmm.
this, and all of a sudden like it actually is a burden to try and
Track that.
remember whether or not you're on budget. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's a cool concept of like, just as long as my stream in is higher than my stream out, I'm gonna be okay. It, it's kind of a cool concept, and I could see like your watch or something showing you just this constant stream with a little graph of like how you're doing or something. Um, but I think in reality, it's probably hard because, like you mentioned, like going on a vacation or like there's a lot of purchases you make or ways you earn money that are kind of like bucketed into single big instances and not kind of evenly streamed throughout your life. And so I wonder how you would handle something like that in those in that world. Like, would you somehow be allocating, like, I don't know, whatever, 10 sats a second to your vacation fund that you then use so you can kind of allocate that way, and then maintain this like constant stream, and then once it builds up enough you go on vacation or something. It's
Yeah,
kind of
it would be a
interesting. I mean, yeah,
challenge.
maybe there'll be a new, maybe you just discovered an opportunity for like a new budgeting service that looks at your money per second. We'll see.
Yeah, interesting to think about. I got a couple more questions on Lightning use cases I want to get to.
Okay.
So, if you were to reflect and kind of look back on the last few years of Lightning adoption and development, just the entire ecosystem, what do you think? What are you happy about? What do you think the community has really gotten right or nailed? And what do you think the community should be focused on improving? And what do you think the Lightning community has not quite figured out yet?
Yeah. Well, it's still, I think, really early, so it's hard to be very judgmental because I feel like, it's still like early innings. We're still really focused on the actual protocol and making sure the infrastructure is in place to be able to have this be really adopted. And but in terms of like what the ecosystem has gotten right, I think, I don't know when you first started using Lightning, but I did start playing around with LND and C Lightning actually, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, when it was considered reckless to use it. And you do just feel like a lot different, like set of, I don't know, there's like a different confidence level today when using it. Like back then payments failed all the time and I just kind of assumed I was going to lose the money in my channels. Like I didn't really know what exactly was going on. I mean, part of that was just my own ignorance, but I just remember that I think I was using like Zap Wallet maybe at the time, what eventually became Strike essentially, but and I just had a lot of problems like connecting to my node. They're in opening channels that they would fail and I would get like these verbose error messages that I didn't know what was going on, and trying to send payments. Everything was just kind of a mess. And today you have Blue Wallet and Breeze and Moon and all these mobile wallets that make this experience of using Lightning just really easy. And you even amazing, you see like things like Cash App rolling it out, and all the exchanges are rolling it out now. So I think just in terms of like reliability, I guess, is sort of the big one that we've seen kind of really steadily improve over the last couple of years, to the point where it feels like it's pretty much usable today.
Mhm.
I think every once in a while you'll still see a failed payments, but there's a lot of work and research being done by people like Renee and others in the ecosystem to make the reliability there, to really get that higher. And there's a lot of cool tech, like we've seen like the multi-path payments rollout, which kind of also added, again, increases reliability because it gives you the ability to split your payment into smaller payments so that they individually have a higher chance of success. So I think we've just seen a lot of work gone into making the efficient, like, I don't know, I guess I keep saying reliability, but I think the reliability of the network much stronger. And I think it's to a point today where it is largely usable. You can make a payment and it pretty much always goes through. And so that's been really great to see. Um, I guess where I think we're still lacking is sort of what some of these other chains and coins and tokens and shit coins have been experimenting with, is they've been able to create this ecosystem that is a little more, I guess the word would be fun, like engaging. Like people seem to like, what's going on over there. I don't know. I guess maybe a lot of it's just gambling, glorified gambling. But I think, like this HQ Trivia app or some other things that like Zebedee and Thunder Game, like I'd like to see some people focused on making it more fun and engaging to use, kind of really explore what new use cases, or like not just even use cases, but like experiences, like this earning through the TV idea or something like that. What can it really people, I feel like not enough people are playing in that area. We're still, I mean, and maybe it's just because there's not enough, there's not enough people working on Lightning yet, and the people that are focused on sort of, I guess, maybe the more important things like the infrastructure and the underlying network, so that this all works. But what I'm
Mhm.
really excited to see in the next couple of years, maybe now that the network and the reliability is to a standard that is enough to be used for payments, is to really start to see these new experiences for payments and users experiencing Lightning on the internet, and what we can do there. And so I think that's still really lacking, and I think there's a ton of awesome opportunity there. And it's
Yeah,
definitely an area I'm interested in exploring too.
I agree. And so this is a good segue to a last question. Now that network reliability has improved, now
Hmm.
that we're at the point where payments are usable and we're looking for these new experiences, if you had to pick, I mean, you've mentioned a few of them, but if you had to pick one experience, what is it? What do you think the first experience a lot of people are going to have um, when they first interact with the Lightning Network? What will that first experience be? Um, will it be remittances? Will it be gaming? Will it be like it's going to be payments in some context, but what
Yep.
specific kind of payment do you think most people will start their Lightning journey with?
Well, I'm also, I guess we didn't talk about this at all, but I'm of the mind that Lightning should largely be hidden from the user also. Like, I don't think people should know about, like, the end user should really know about Lightning, that you shouldn't use the term Lightning. It shouldn't really even be mentioned. I think it should all just be focused on Bitcoin as the money, and Bitcoin should just be provide the best experience a user's ever had when using money. And if that means that the app or whatever they're using is using Lightning under the hood, then then that's great. That's what it needs to do to achieve that experience for that user. Um, and so I don't think people are going to have like a first real like Lightning experience. My hope is that um, Bitcoin becomes the default money of the internet and the earth, like we all dream. And in that world, the all the services and applications they use are going to need to rely on something Lightning, or like something like Lightning, to enable the experience their users want. And so I think what I would guess is something like Cash App or Venmo, is going to be probably largely the main use case people are going to be introduced to Lightning, where they want to send and receive money with their friends. I think people do that all the time on apps like Venmo and Cash App, and that's why they're so popular. I just think what's going to happen is eventually that money that they're sending back and forth is going to be Bitcoin instead of their local currency. And so I don't think there probably won't be this new amazing use case that gets them to adopt Lightning. I think Bitcoin, sound money is the use case, and Lightning
Mm,
is just a technology that enables it to be used like people want it to be, like fast and for low fees. And so I'd still imagine that something like just sending and receiving money to your friends is probably going to be the first use case. But I think what you were maybe originally getting at was, and if I had to answer it in that way, I would say, the gaming use case I think is really exciting for a lot of people, where they could just be playing, I don't know what game, whatever game is the game of the day that's popular, and be wagering and winning money for Bitcoin in real time on anywhere on the earth for doing that. I think there's a lot of cool use cases there that might get people into Bitcoin.
yeah. No, I like that framing of having like people want Bitcoin and Lightning is just a means by which they get it. And realistically, if we're going to be sending a lot of these payments over the internet and wanting to have instant payments, there will be some kind of Lightning-like system in the background behind all the apps. And I could totally see a future where it does just kind of like get abstracted away, and the end user just never even realizes they're using Lightning.
Yep.
So now let's wrap this up. I want to hear more about like, where people can find you and Sensei, and if people are listening in and this is their first experience, hearing about Sensei, where can people go to learn more about the project?
Yeah, so mostly hang out on the Sensei Discord. So if you go to l2.technology and click on the Discord link, there's a bunch of people hanging out in there who it's still really early for Sensei. So mostly it's like kind of development talk about which way we should take certain, implement certain features and whatnot. But I hope it to also be a place for people who are experimenting with it and playing with it and giving feedback and things like that to hang out and chat. So definitely come over to Discord if you're somewhat interested in talking about Sensei or using Sensei for a project, or even, LDK or BDK, anything. I'm open to help if you're looking at integrating those projects into your work. I'm also pretty much only on Twitter. That's the only social network I really use at this point anymore. So you can find me at JohnCantrell97. My DMs are open. I do get a lot of people asking me to brute force seeds for them because of that thing I did for Alistair back a couple of years ago. And please stop. I can't brute force Bitcoin. No one can. So that's all.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time. I learned so much today, and I'm excited to follow along with Sensei and the latest developments there.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Zebedee, your portal into the world of Bitcoin gaming. The Zebedee app, that is Zebedee, is a full-featured Lightning wallet and allows you to earn Bitcoin for playing games. Now, I thought it'd be fun to spice things up a bit, so if you go download the Zebedee app, you'll get a chance to compete against me and earn some extra sats. Each month, I'll be playing a different Zebedee game, and you can find them all in the Zebedee app, but this month, I'm gonna play Sarutobi. Now, my high score on Sarutobi is currently 625 meters on flyby mode, so if you go download the Zebedee app and beat my high score, send me a screenshot of it on Twitter, as well as your Zebedee gamer tag, and I'll send you some extra sats. Good luck. All right, in the last 7 days, you guys sent in 20,064 sats. 14 different supporters sent in 6 different messages. Let's run through the top 5 supporters of the week. We got Jeffrey, who sent in 3,920 sats. Dave Jones sent in 3,491. Mary Oscar sent in 2,646. BitBoom sent in 1,960, and Peter sent in 1,699 sats. Thank you to everyone who is sending in sats and comments and questions. Let's run through the recent comments. We've only had a couple in the last 2 days since I published the last episode. First one comes in from BitBoom. BitBoom says, "Keep it coming, Kevin, much appreciated," and sent in 1,960 sats. Thank you, BitBoom. There's lots more content coming down the pipeline. I think you guys are really gonna like the guests that I have lined up. And then we got another message from Mary Oscar, who just says, "Test." He's obviously testing some interesting new features. Can't wait to see what Fountain rolls out next. If you guys have any comments or questions on today's episode, send them in over to Lightning Network. Use an app like Fountain, and I can't wait to see them and answer all your questions in the next episode. See you soon.